My name is Valerie. I'm 29. The crystal tumbler clinked against a silver spoon, and in that single sharp sound, the entire room fell dead silent. My father, Richard, stood at the head of the grand dining table in our Lake Tahoe estate, scotch held high, eyes gleaming with pride. "To my son, Caleb, the sole heir to the entire $18 million estate." 50 guests erupted in cheers, clapping, toasting, beaming as if witnessing destiny fulfilled. Caleb soaked it in like sunlight, chin lifted, already wearing the invisible crown. And me? I stood in the shadows beside the mahogany bookshelf, fingers curled around a single manila envelope pressed tight to my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just smiled. That cold, precise curve of the lips that means you've already won. My eyes locked onto Marcus, our family attorney, and I said 4 words that turned the air to ice. "You really don't know, do you?" Richard's face flushed deep purple. "No? What?" But before I tell you what was inside that envelope, and why Caleb's smug grin crumpled into ghostly panic in under 3 seconds, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I want to see how far this truth travels. Because this isn't just my story. It's yours too. If you've ever been used, erased, or told your worth is your utility. For 10 years, I didn't just manage this estate, I breathed life into it. While Caleb jetted off on what Richard called visionary retreats, we all knew they were benders in Vegas, ski weekends in Aspen, and recovery trips in Cabo. I was the one fighting city council for boathouse permits, renegotiating contracts with vendors who tried to overcharge us by 40%, and standing ankle-deep in freezing water at 3 a.m. when a pipe burst in the guest lodge. Richard slept soundly in the main house, dreams untouched by consequence. Caleb couldn't tell a lease agreement from a lunch menu, yet every time a project finished on time and under budget, because of me, Richard would clap him on the back and say, "Good work, son. You're building a legacy." They thought I was the obedient spare, desperate for scraps of approval. What they didn't realize was that while I fixed their toilets and balanced their books, I was also learning where the bodies were buried. I memorized zoning laws, tax codes, and property statutes. I studied loopholes like scripture. They broke me down to keep me small. But today, I'm the one holding the hammer, and I've been sharpening it for years. The breaking point came exactly 7 days ago. I walked into Richard's study with a stack of financial reports showing our most profitable quarter in history, entirely due to a restructuring I'd designed. My voice was steady as I asked for what I deserved. 10% equity, not the whole estate, just a sliver to acknowledge that I was the engine keeping his luxury life running. Richard didn't just say no. He looked at me with genuine confusion, like his toaster had just asked for a promotion. "Equity?" He laughed, pouring himself another drink. "Valerie, you don't get equity. You get a roof over your head." "I do the work, Dad," I said, my voice shaking in a way I hated. "Caleb does nothing. I built this value. I earned a share." That's when the mask slipped. He slammed his glass down, whiskey sloshing over his hand. "You earned nothing. I fed you for 18 years. I paid for your braces, your college, your clothes. You think that was free?" He leaned in, eyes cold and dead. "You aren't a partner, Valerie. You are my investment. I poured money into you so you could be useful to this family. You don't get dividends from the company. You are the company's equipment. Do not confuse your function with your worth." I stood there, feeling my soul turn to ice. That was the moment. That was the narcissistic arithmetic that ruled my life. To him, I wasn't a child to be loved. I was a debt that could never be repaid. I walked out without a word. He thought I went to cry. Instead, I went to my office, opened the safe, and took the manila envelope I'd been hiding for 3 years. He wanted a return on his investment? Fine. I was about to cash out, with interest. Being the spare isn't just about being second best. It's about being an insurance policy no one wants to pay the premium on. You exist solely to be used in emergencies, then shoved back into the closet when the crisis passes. For the last 3 years, I lived in that closet. I watched Caleb treat the business I built like his personal ATM. He didn't just spend money, he incinerated it. There was the time he dumped $50,000 into a crypto scheme pitched by a guy he met at a blackjack table in Reno. When it vanished, Richard didn't get angry. He just called me in and said, "Move some numbers around to cover it. Caleb's a visionary who takes risks. You're too risk-averse to understand high-level finance." I didn't argue. I moved the numbers, but I also made a copy of the transaction. I logged the date, the time, and the IP address. Then came the summer gala 2 years ago. Caleb was supposed to secure catering permits. He forgot, because he was on a yacht in the Mediterranean. 2 days before the event, the city threatened to shut us down. I spent 48 hours straight at City Hall, calling in every favor, bribing clerks with donuts and charm, rewriting safety protocols by hand. I saved the event. At the dinner that night, Richard raised a glass. To Caleb, pulling off the event of the season. Caleb grinned, swirling his wine. "It was nothing, Dad. Just takes a little charisma." Then he looked at me, sitting at the far end of the table in my wrinkled work blouse, eyes burning from lack of sleep. "You look tired, Val. Maybe you should get some rest. Let the big dogs handle the celebration." The whole table laughed. My cousins, aunts, investors, they looked at me with that pitying smile reserved for the help. They saw a tired, frumpy girl with a spreadsheet addiction. They mocked my binders. They rolled their eyes at my obsession with receipts. They laughed at me then, but they didn't know those spreadsheets were the shovel I was using to dig their graves. They didn't know that every time they dismissed me, I was documenting a felony. Every time Caleb forged a signature, I archived it. Every time Richard moved assets to hide them from the IRS, I saved the file. They thought I was keeping the books to save them. I was keeping the books to bury them. Back in the living room, the applause for Caleb finally died down. Richard looked at me, annoyed that I'd interrupted his moment. He thought I was about to cry about fairness again. He had no idea the equity was already gone. I took a step forward, the floorboards creaking under my heels. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hand, dense, with 3 years of silence. Caleb peeled himself away from a group of adoring socialites and sauntered over, smelling like 18-year-old scotch and unearned confidence. He leaned against the bookshelf, swirling his glass, looking at me with that half-lidded, pitying expression. "Don't look so sour, Val," he said, voice low enough that only I could hear the venom. "Someone has to lose for someone else to win. That's just capitalism." "You haven't won anything, Caleb," I said, keeping my voice level. "You were handed a prize you didn't earn." He laughed, a sharp bark. "Earned? Who cares about earned? Possession is 9/10 of the law. And as of 5 minutes ago, I possess everything." He gestured grandly to the room, the lake view, the expensive art. "I'm already making changes. Big vision stuff, starting with the guest cottage." My stomach tightened. The guest cottage wasn't empty. "What about the cottage?" I asked. "Cleared it out this morning," he said casually, taking a sip. "Turning it into a VIP lounge, poker tables, humidors, the works. Needed the space for tonight's after party." "Cleared it out? I stared at him. Caleb, Mrs. Higgins lives there. Mrs. Higgins was Grandma Eleanor's dearest friend, 82 years old, frail, terrified of change. Grandma had promised her a home for life. I'd been the one ensuring her heat worked, bringing her groceries, making sure she felt safe. Not anymore, Caleb shrugged. Told her to pack her bags, sent a couple guys to move her junk to the Motel 6 off the highway. She was crying, making a scene. Pathetic. You can't let sentimentality get in the way of asset optimization. I felt the blood drain from my face. He didn't just evict a tenant. He evicted a dying woman who was basically family, just so he could have a place to smoke cigars with his degenerate friends. He didn't even wait for the ink to dry. He did it that morning, before he even officially owned the place. She's 82, I whispered. You put an 82-year-old woman in a motel. I cut the dead weight, Valerie, he said. Which brings me to you. He stepped closer, invading my space. Dad and I had a talk. We don't need a property manager anymore. I've got friends who can handle the books. And let's be honest, it's not like you have anything else going on. No husband, no kids, no legacy. You're a genetic dead end. He poked a finger into my shoulder. So here's the deal. You can stay in your little apartment over the garage for a month while you look for a job. But tonight, your staff, go grab a broom and clean up the spilled champagne in the hallway. Make yourself useful for once. He winked, turned on his heel, and walked back to the crowd, high-fiving a cousin as he went. I watched him strut, own the room, think he was untouchable. He had just crossed the final line. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about the disrespect. It was about Mrs. Higgins shivering in a motel room because this monster wanted a poker lounge. He wanted me to be useful? Fine. I would clean it up. I would scrub this entire family clean until there was nothing left but the truth. I looked down at the envelope. The seal was still unbroken. I ran my thumb under the flap and tore it open. The sound was sharp, like a bone snapping. It was time to go to work. I walked to the center of the room, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. Caleb was laughing with investors, already spending money he didn't have. Richard was accepting congratulations from the mayor. They looked so secure, so invincible. Excuse me, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a knife. Before we continue the celebration, there's a small administrative matter we need to clear up. Richard turned, his smile tight. Valerie, not now. We're in the middle of a toast. It's about the deeds, I said, holding up the envelope. Specifically the ownership of the Lake Tahoe portfolio. Caleb rolled his eyes. Give it a rest, Val. Dad already announced it. I own everything. Get over it. Actually, I said, opening the envelope and pulling out a stack of documents. You don't. I walked over to the nearest table, moved a tray of expensive hors d'oeuvres, and laid the papers out one by one. The deed to the main house, the deed to the guest lodge, the deeds to the 3 rental properties on the North Shore. These are the original deeds, I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the room. Recorded with the county clerk, not yesterday, not last week, 3 years ago. Marcus, the family lawyer, frowned and stepped forward. He picked up the first document, adjusting his glasses. He scanned the recording stamp, the date, the signature. His face went pale. He looked at the next one. And the next. Richard, Marcus said, his voice trembling. These are real. These were recorded 3 years ago. What are you talking about? Richard snapped, snatching the paper from him. That's impossible. My mother left everything to me. Grandma Eleanor didn't trust you. Dad? I said. She knew you'd give everything to Caleb, and she knew Caleb would destroy it in a year. So 3 years ago, on her deathbed, she transferred the entire estate into a trust managed solely by me. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. I have been the landlord for 3 years, I continued, looking directly at Caleb. Every lease agreement signed by me, every contractor payment authorized by me, and the rent didn't go into the family account. It went into a shadow account I set up to pay off the debts Caleb was secretly racking up. I pulled out another sheet, a ledger. Gambling debts in Vegas, the settlement for the car crash in Reno, the investment in that crypto scam. I paid it all. I let you play rich while I cleaned up your mess. Caleb's face was a mask of shock. You stole my money. I saved your ass, I corrected him. But I'm done saving it. As of this morning, I have dissolved the shadow account. The free ride is over. I reached into the envelope one last time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I walked over to Caleb and slapped it against his chest. And this, I said, is an eviction notice, not for Mrs. Higgins, for you. Richard was sputtering, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Why? He screamed, echoing his earlier outburst. Why did you wait? Why did you let us humiliate ourselves for 3 years? I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt power. Because I knew you, I said. I knew if I told you the truth, you would have guilt-tripped me. You would have sued me. You would have bullied me until I signed it back over. I had to wait until you made your move. I had to wait until you claimed ownership publicly in front of all these witnesses, so that when I revealed the truth, you would have nowhere to hide. I let you build your castle on quicksand, Dad, specifically so I could watch it sink. It was a Trojan horse. I had carried the truth inside their walls for 3 years, waiting for the exact moment they tried to erase me. And now, the walls were coming down. Caleb stared at the eviction notice, his hands shaking. Then a strange, desperate laugh bubbled out of his throat. He reached into his jacket pocket. You think you're so smart? He sneered, his eyes wild. But you forgot one thing. He pulled out a folded document. Grandma signed a power of attorney 2 days before she died. It gives me control over all assets, real estate, trusts, everything. It overrides your little trust. It overrides everything. He held it up like a weapon. For a moment, the room froze. Richard relaxed. Marcus hesitated. It looked like I had lost, but I wasn't worried. I knew exactly where Grandma was 2 days before she died, and I had proof. October 14th? I said calmly. Are you sure? I handed Marcus a hospital file. He opened it, turned to the page marked October 14th. His face drained. She was intubated, he said. Sedated in a medically induced coma, physically restrained. I met Caleb's eyes. She couldn't sign anything. The silence turned dangerous. You didn't just lose the house? I said evenly. You presented a forged legal document to an attorney in front of 50 witnesses. That's felony fraud. Marcus dropped the document. I can't be part of this, he said. Richard, this is criminal. Richard stared at his son. What did you do? Caleb panicked, and then he confessed. I used the forgery, he gasped. I have private debts, $500,000. I gave them the house as collateral. They're coming at 5. I checked my watch. 4:45 p.m. Richard grabbed me. You have to sign it back. He's your brother. I pulled away. I don't owe you anything, and I'm done paying for Caleb's sins. I opened the door. You invited them. This is your deal. As I drove away, black SUVs turned into the driveway. I didn't call my family. I called the police. The house was seized by morning. Caleb went to prison for forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. Richard lost everything: his fortune, his reputation, his illusions. He's living in a rented efficiency in Reno, selling old cufflinks online to pay rent. I hear he still calls old friends, begging for one more chance. I never answer. Now I live in a small, sunlit apartment with a lease in my name. The wine I pour tonight tastes like freedom. Clean, uncomplicated, mine. I stopped trying to save people who were willing to burn me just to stay warm. I've learned that loyalty must be earned, not assumed. That love should never come with an invoice, and that the most powerful weapon isn't rage, it's preparation. If you've ever had to choose between saving your family and saving yourself, you're not alone. You matter, not for what you can do, but for who you are. So if this story touched you, drop a comment below. Tell me your name, your country, your time, or just write, "I'm still here." Because the first step to taking back your life isn't shouting, it's remembering your name.